All right, I hope you made it. What have we got here? So in the case of Antelope IDs, we have to pass an array of IDs. So here we're using array map just to convert to integer the values inside filter value. And if it is in an array, then we're casting the filter value to an array. Then we have the case color, we have the location ID, we cast it to integer just to make sure that it's an integer what we're passing, and the same goes for the type ID. All right, now second step is to create an interface for Antelope's expander. Go to the factory to create a method for creating an instance of Antelope's expander, and then we have to pass that instance into the Antelope reader by using dependency injection through the constructor. So pause your video, give it a try, take a look at what we did with the reader. We do the same thing for the expander, but the expander has to be passed as a dependency for the reader because we have to then map the glue request transfer into Antelope conditions. All right, I hope it was pretty easy for you. So here we have the interface. If we need to add some other methods, then we have the interface ready here. And here in the factory, what we could have done was to create an instance of the Antelope's expander here, and then we inject that dependency inside the Antelope reader. Of course, we should have changed the constructor here for the Antelope reader, and you can see that we type hint with Antelope's expander interface, and then in the factory, we pass this dependency here with create expander. And now it's time to call this Antelope's expander to expand the conditions here. So we have this condition that is empty, this variable. We don't have any conditions inside. So we have to call this Antelope expander, expand with filter. We pass the Antelope condition transfer. In this case, we just called it conditions. And then we pass the glue request transfer. In this way, the conditions are going to have all of the conditions that were passed through the API call. So we have now the condition passed here in set Antelope conditions. Everything should be wired up. So it means that when we call the reader and we call get Antelope collection, we're using the expander to add the conditions to the conditions object. And then we pass the conditions here on line 34 to set the conditions. After that, when we call the get Antelope collection, we go through the Antelope facade, we go through the Antelope reader in the Antelope's module, and then we land in the repository. And here is what we created, the apply search, and we have the condition here, okay? We're gonna get the ID Antelope, if it is present, then the name, etc. If you would like to change here the condition to use and instead of or, feel free just to modify the conditions the way you want the response to be managed. And now it's time to give it a try. So let's go back to our file, Antelope's HTTP, and the first filter that we're going to use here is the ID. So because we decided that if we pass the ID, then we just return the result. So let's give it a try. We can just click here, play, and then reload with breakpoint, but we haven't set any breakpoint. Let's take a look at the output. All right, and you can see that we have the Antelope with ID 1. We have the data here, and you can see the attributes. We have ID Antelope 1. Let's give it a try now by searching by name. We can change here some of the parameters. Let's remove the Antelope ID and let's just leave by name, and let's filter Grunker, for example. And there you go. And if we remove cur and just search for Grun, you can see that we have Grunker. Let's try imp, and then we have Impala. Now let's filter by type ID. So we have to pass Antelope's type ID, and let's filter by type ID 1. And you can see we have the Antelope with ID 1, then we have Antelope with ID 2, and you can see that the type ID is 1. And you see all of the antelopes that belong to type ID 1. We can do the same thing for location. Let's just type here location ID, and let's change it. Let's change it for 2, location ID 2. And you can see here, we have all of the records with location ID 2. Now let's try Antelope's ID and let's pass ID 1 and ID 2. You can see that we're getting only ID number 1. Why? Because we're casting the value that we're passing here to an array, and it's getting only the first value. If we just separate the two values like this, so we pass the first filter and then ampersand, and then we pass 2. So in this case, to pass it as an array, if we separate them, we have to add the square brackets here. But let's suppose that we wanted to just pass the values like this. Okay? In this case, we have to split these values in the mapper, the expander. So here, instead of just calling the int_val here and casting to an array, because here we have 1, 2, we first try to transform this value to an array. So filter value would be explode, okay, but we would have to first verify if it's string enter filter value, we explode, otherwise filter value. Let's give it a try. And you can see that it works. We have ID 1 and then we have ID 2. You can also see that we declared the Antelope IDs as string. So it means that we expect to receive the antelopes as a string, like this. But if we wanted to manage both of them, then we would do it this way. We can refactor this code and we can extract a method and we can call it getIDs. Let's improve this code here. So here we don't have to cast to array anymore, but we can use array filter here just to avoid, for example, empty values, and also we can trim the values. So we can apply array filter and then we can pass an arrow function, and here we just return if it's numeric, and we trim also the value if we have blanks. And here we can just return this value here. As you can see, we map every value to int_val, but first we filter the array to get rid of empty values or null values, and then we trim and just return the ones that are numeric. Okay, we can specify here that we're going to receive either a string or an array. Okay, we specify here in the annotation that it could be a string or an array of strings. All right, so here we have it. We have the IDs, we call the getIDs, and it should work now like before, but the code is safer in this way. Let's give it a try again. All right, and now you can see that we have the two records that were specified in the Antelope's ID. If we add, for example, number 5, then you can see that we also get the ID number 5.